Please welcome AIPAC Deputy Director of Policy and Government Affairs, Dave Gillette.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us at this showcase session. And before we even continue the program, let's give another round of applause to Moran. Thank you, Moran, for sharing your inspiring story. People like Moran remind us why we come to Washington to advocate for this cause. The dauntless Israeli spirit and the unbreakable connection we share based on our values and our common ideals. So I want to thank all of you for coming to Washington this week for the important work that we are doing, and more importantly, for the important work that you do throughout the year back home, work to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship. Now, our program today highlights just how important it is that both parties support a strong alliance between the United States and Israel. And we have a chance today at this session to hear from two members of Congress who work closely together to ensure a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, the Democratic and Republican leaders of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We'll also talk one-on-one with two pro-Israel champions from completely opposite ends of the political spectrum, progressive leader J. David Cox and conservative icon Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. So let's dive right in and welcome our first two guests. Our first guest, Representative Eliot Engel of New York, is a long-term friend of the pro-Israel communities. This is his 32nd policy conference in attendance. He's been a vocal leader on all issues of importance to the U.S.-Israel relationship over the last 3 decades and sits today as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Joining Eliot on this stage will be Representative McCaul, also a leading voice, a leader in Congress on issues related to Homeland Security and Foreign Affairs, formerly chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security, and now the ranking Republican on the Foreign Affairs Committee. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage two of our greatest and most stalwart allies, Eliot Engel and McCaul.
David.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
That was great.
Congressman.
Like it? They told me.
Well, first of all, to both of you, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all you do working together to advance the U.S.-Israel relationship.
Thank you.
Look, we need to talk about what happened last night in Israel, the firing of rockets from Hamas to a community just north of Tel Aviv, 7 Israeli citizens in the hospital today. It, I think, is a sign of the hair trigger that exists in terms of potential conflict for Israel and the threat that Israel faces both in the north and in the south. Now, the two of you working together with your counterparts of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee are currently leading an effort, one that we'll be supporting on Tuesday on Capitol Hill, to ensure that the U.S. is standing with Israel. Chairman Engel, can you tell us about this important and I think unique letter in that it's being co-authored by the chair and ranking of this committee and the chair and ranking members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee?
Well, it's being sponsored and co-sponsored by all 4 of us because all 4 of us understand that Israel and the United States stand as one and should stand as one. And we want to make sure that with any policy decisions that are made in Washington, that we take into account Israel's legitimate security needs. And it's very, very important for the United States and Israel to keep coordinating things. You know, I always say presidents come and go, prime ministers come and go, even members of Congress come and go, although Mike and I don't want to go so quickly.
Not going anywhere.
It's the U.S.-Israel relationship that has to remain strong in both parties, regardless of who's there. And that's what we want to ensure. And so we're having a situation where it's good to see so many AIPAC activists because we want to take that message to our colleagues on Capitol Hill to say also, please take Israel's legitimate security needs into account whenever we make a move as the United States of America, because the United States and Israel should stand as one and will always stand as one.
Thank you. Congressman McCaul, I think if you look at the U.S. Congress, you see a body that is reflexively supportive of the U.S.-Israel relationship. But when you look at the fact that there was this attack yesterday, Israelis in the hospital, you look at the threat to the north and to the south, do you think your colleagues truly understand the hair trigger that exists? Do you think that there's a deep enough understanding of the actual threats that Israel faces?
Yeah, I think so. I think the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee certainly understand this. We always encourage members to travel to Israel because you really understand it better when you see it and you see the threat that's over there. I was very honored, not only honored to serve with Eliot as he's the chairman, I'm the ranking member. This is really embodying what AIPAC represents, Republicans and Democrats working together for the tie between the United States and Israel. And I think it's never been stronger than it is today. But we like to educate them because when you go over there, for instance, Ellie and I went over there and we went to the Gaza and we saw the tunnels and we saw the rockets, and they told us that their concern at the time would there would be so many rockets coming either out of Gaza or Lebanon where these manufacturing plants are being built that it could actually overload the Iron Dome. And I think that was a big takeaway for us, and we've actually seen that happen since our trip, and we're seeing it happen right now. I think that's why Prime Minister Netanyahu went back early to Israel to defend his nation.
Well, thank you. You touched on something important in terms of the partnership between the two of you. It's no secret that the partisanship that exists in Washington today is at an ever-increasing level. It's tough for the two parties to work together, for the House to work with the Senate, and yet the House Foreign Affairs Committee historically, and certainly right now, with the two of you in its leadership, seems to be a committee that's able to work in a bipartisan way in support of a strong and meaningful U.S. foreign policy. How is it the two of you are able to ensure that this committee works together in a bipartisan way? Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
first of all, I think it's very important that when it comes to foreign policies, foreign affairs, partisan politics should stop at the water's edge. I think it's very important that other nations see us as working together, and we've had that tradition on the Foreign Affairs Committee certainly for the past 6 years when Ed Royce was chairman and I was ranking member, and now that I'm chairman and Mike's ranking member, we're continuing that because we think it is very important, and it's very important for people of both parties to support Israel, to work together, and to stop with the partisan bickering. And there's no better place to do that than on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And so we find it very easily. We're taking a trip in a few days. We're going to go to Israel again. We were in Israel together last year with a lot of AIPAC activists who went with us. And it's very easy because we know that Israel has no better ally than the United States, and the United States has no better ally than Israel. So what party we belong to isn't really relevant. What's relevant is support for Israel.
Congressman McCaul, you've worked on Homeland Security issues as chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security. You're working together now in terms of foreign affairs. I hope that these are issues in general where there's more agreement between the parties than on some other issues. But is there something special about the Israel issue, or is it just like any other issue in terms of the ability for Democrats and Republicans to work together?
Well, this is the second oldest committee in the Congress. Benjamin Franklin was the first chairman, so you're in very good company with that. And it just shows you something about the heritage. Elliot and I are very protective of the integrity of the committee. And what do I mean by that? It's a national security committee. It should not be politicized. It should not be partisan. We need to come together as Americans. He often says it ends at the water's edge. In fact, when we travel overseas, we travel not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans representing the United States of America. And that's what's so great about it.
Well, I think it probably speaks to the historic role of the committee. to the view of foreign policy within the Congress, but also to the integrity of the two of you. Both of you are outspoken supporters of the U.S.-Israel relationship. I know it's a popular position with some of your constituents and from some quarters, but I have no doubt that you both receive criticism from some quarters for your support of the U.S.-Israel relationship, for standing up for the right of everybody in this room to go to Capitol Hill on Tuesday to advocate on behalf of the U.S.-Israel relationship. So when you are criticized for your support of the U.S.-Israel relationship, how do you answer that? Let's start with you, Congressman.
You know, it's biblical. It's our history. My dad was a bombardier on a B-17 D-Day air campaign. I remember going to Normandy and seeing what they achieved there, and then going to Auschwitz to see, you know, the horrors of the gas chambers and what Dr. Mengele did. I have multiple children as well, and I just think it's such an important alliance that I'm more than happy to take any criticism. I am deeply disturbed by some in the Congress who are threatening this alliance. I don't think I've seen this in the 15 years I've been in the Congress, and I don't have any tolerance for that. And I think we need to. And I just think we have a duty and an obligation, and Eliot's been great at this as well, to denounce anti-Semitism and hatred in all of its forms. It's hard to imagine, for me, one generation away, my father and his generation, the idea that this could possibly be on the rise is absolutely unacceptable, and we'll do everything we can to fight it.
Well, I've always been a strong supporter of Israel. I'm very proud of my Jewish heritage. I'm very proud of the fact that the United States and Israel have remained good friends, regardless, as I said before, of who may be in control of any party at any given time, who may be the president or who may be the prime minister. And I think that when you take a look at Israel, Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel shares the same values as the United States. And while there are countries all over the world, we think it's very important, I think it's very important to make sure that the little Jewish state of Israel is strengthened, because we have so much in common between the United States and Israel. And that's why, as I think was mentioned before, this is my 32nd consecutive AIPAC policy conference. I haven't missed one in 30 years. And I really want to thank AIPAC for the work it really does, because it's not simply a matter of one-sidedness Israel takes and the United States gives. Israel is a major partner of us in so many ways. So both countries are enhanced by the U.S.-Israel relationship. We share all kinds of military technology, all kinds of intelligence technology. There are all kinds of things going on behind the scenes. And what we see is time in and time out, year in and year out, that the bond is strengthened. So yes, we may have some people who say things that they should not say, and I was very happy to voice my objection to it publicly. But by and large, the American people support the U.S.-Israel relationship because the American people know that our friend and ally Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East and a country that we need to support, because together we'll make sure that Israel and the United States, the bond, the strong bond, is never broken.
Now, you've spoken of the bond between the United States and Israel, between the peoples of the two countries. The letter that you're leading on and circulating talks about some of the security threats that the country faces and what the U.S. can do to stand with Israel to ensure it has the tools to defend itself by itself. And in many ways, that's one side of the equation. The other is the ever-going search for peace. It's said that the Trump administration will possibly very soon unveil a plan to bring the Palestinians and the Israelis together in negotiations, trying to reach a deal between the two. What are you expecting to see in this plan? What are some of the issues that you imagine will be addressed by the proposal when it's put forward?
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to just go a little bit back in history, because
Yep.
I think it's important that we look at it in a context. In 1947, United Nations Security Council Resolution 181 took what was then historic Palestine and divided it into what it called a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews accepted the partition. The Arab response was to attack Israel and try to push it into the sea. So when we hear all these things now with revisionist history, Israel has always been ready to make peace. It's the fact that the Arab nations refuse to make peace. And so I think that, again, it is very important to say that we need to talk to these countries that the United States has relationships with and make sure that they understand that it's beneficial for them as well. Israel has always been ready to make peace. It's never been understood by me why the Jewish people are not entitled, especially after the Shoah, to have a state. The Jewish ties to the Holy Land go back many, many, many years. And so I think that when we talk about what we have in common, the United States and Israel have plenty in common, but we have to look at history. Israel has not been the intransigent country here. Israel has always been ready to make peace, and we have to make sure that there is peace by others that want to, by others. We have to make sure that Syria, for instance, is not being used as a dropping point for Iran with which it could attack Israel. And we are both, Michael and I, urging the administration to make sure that that does not happen. And we have to take a look at Syria now, and we have to understand that the Iranians cannot be near the Israeli-Syrian border, and anything and everything must be done to keep them away.
Congressman McCaul, as Chairman Engel pointed out, over the last couple of decades, there have been very generous proposals put on the table by the Israelis in their search for peace. And every single time the Palestinian answer has been either no or no answer whatsoever.
Right.
What do you think that the administration, the United States can do to help bring the Palestinians to the table and encourage them to just sit down and to negotiate?
Well, first let me say that I think AIPAC and the Israeli community are the thing that really unites Congress and the American people in a time where it's so deeply divided, and I want to thank everybody for participating in this. I think the two-state solution is what we're looking for. Our letter that we sent out to be signed, hopefully by almost every member of Congress, recognizes the existence of the state of Israel. What we found going over there many times, and what has broken down in the past, is that while they're maybe willing to coexist together, they're not willing to recognize even the existence that Israel has the right to exist as a nation. And I think until they get to that point, we'll never have true peace. And how do you get to that point? I think the Palestinians have to see that their income levels is very low, that we're willing to help in certain ways to lift their economic situation. But I think we also have to put leverage from the Arab nations on the Palestinians, and that would be our closest allies, Jordan and Egypt. Who would have thought we'd have peace with the Israelis have peace with Egypt, but they did at the end of the 70s. And then, of course, the King of Jordan, we met with him last week. And I think the Arab League of Nations has a responsibility to promote this peace process. As Eliot talked about, and from a homeland standpoint, what I worry about is a power vacuum in Iraq and Syria. We saw that created one time before under the previous administration, and ISIS reared its ugly head. What I worry about, and I'm glad the president put 400 special operators back in, because without those, we would have a power vacuum, we'd have chaos, and we'd have the Shia militias, what Netanyahu calls the Shia crescent, or the land bridge going into Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and Yemen. And that's what we're trying to prevent, not to mention the reconstitution of ISIS, and the Russians are in there now too. So it's a very complex foreign policy, and it's right next door.
And let me say there's some hope here, because when representatives of the Sunni Arab nations come and talk to us in Washington, and they say things about Iran, who really is the biggest threat to the region, it's the same thing that Jerusalem is saying, the same thing that Israel is saying. And so I would hope that in the future there would be more cooperation between some of the Sunni Arab states and Israel, who believe and understand that each of them is not necessarily the enemy of each other, but Iran is the enemy of all of them. And so I would hope that with the United States' help, we can forge some kind of peace plan as we move forward, so that there's cooperation between some of the Sunni Arab states and Israel.
Well, I think this could go on forever. I hope one day Israel and the Sunni Arab states will be able to work as well together as the two of you do. Then we'll have peace in the region for sure. So on behalf of all of us, I just want to say to the two of you, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for working together. Thank you for what you're doing right now and what I know you're going to do for years and years to come on behalf of a strong U.S.-Israel relationship.
And thank you, and I want to thank everybody in the audience, because when you come to Capitol Hill, people say all the time, does it really do anything? You know, I have to schlep away across the country and do all kinds of things. And the answer is absolutely yes. Washington, the House, the Senate are very much aware of AIPAC activists coming into lobbying. And so keep doing what you've been doing, and I hope to continue doing this with you for another 32 years.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
David.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.